I've been a sign language interpreter for 8 years. I've translated everything from doctor's appointments to court proceedings to college lectures. I know American Sign Language like I know English, fluently, instinctively, without having to think about it. But yesterday, a deaf woman signed something to me that wasn't ASL. It wasn't any sign language I'd ever seen. The movements were wrong, impossible. Her fingers bent in ways fingers shouldn't bend. And the message she conveyed wasn't words. It was a feeling, pure, distilled terror that went straight from her hands into my mind. When I tried to interpret what she'd signed, my own hands moved without my permission, and I understood with absolute clarity that I'd just told the empty air behind her, "Yes, I can see you too." My name is Nina Reeves. I'm 31, and I think sign language might be more than just a way to communicate with the deaf. I think it might be a way to communicate with something else entirely. I became interested in sign language because of my little brother, Tommy. He was born deaf, and watching my parents struggle to communicate with him made me realize how isolating silence could be. So I learned ASL when I was 12, became fluent by 15, and eventually made it my career. I love what I do. There's something beautiful about giving voice to people who can't speak, about being the bridge between the hearing world and the deaf community. It's more than just translating words. It's conveying emotion, intention, context. Every sign has weight. Every gesture carries meaning. Or at least that's what I thought. The woman's name was Patricia Hallbrook, 67 years old, deaf since birth. She'd come to my office for what should have been a routine interpretation. She needed help understanding some legal documents about her late husband's estate. She arrived exactly on time, accompanied by her daughter Karen, who could hear but didn't know much ASL. Patricia was a small, neat woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. She greeted me with a polite smile and sat down across from my desk. We started going through the documents. Standard stuff, property transfers, bank accounts, insurance policies. Patricia asked questions. I interpreted them for Karen. Karen answered. I signed the responses back. Completely normal, until Patricia suddenly stopped mid-sentence and turned to look at the corner of my office. Her face went pale. Her hands, which had been moving gracefully through signs, froze in midair. "Mrs. Hallbrook," I signed. "Are you all right?" She didn't respond. She just stared at that corner, the empty corner where I kept a potted plant and some filing cabinets. Nothing else, nothing that should have drawn her attention. Then she turned back to me and her hands began to move. But they weren't moving in ASL. I can't describe it properly. Imagine if someone tried to speak English, but their mouth formed shapes that human mouths can't make. That's what her hands were doing, creating signs that violated the basic physical limitations of human anatomy. Fingers bending backward, palms twisting in impossible directions. Movements that should have caused her pain but didn't seem to bother her at all. And as she signed, I felt something. Not understanding exactly. More like absorption. The meaning bypassing language entirely and going straight into my brain. She was telling me, "It's in the corner. It's been watching you for months. It likes the way your hands move when you sign. It wants to learn." I looked at the corner. Saw nothing but the plant and the cabinets. When I looked back, Patricia was crying silently. Her hands moved again, this time in proper ASL. "You can't see it yet, but it can see you. And now that I've told you about it, it knows you know." "Mrs. Hallbrook, I don't understand." She interrupted me with more of that wrong signing. And this time I understood even more clearly. It's not from here. It doesn't have a body like we do. But it's learning. Watching deaf people sign. Learning our language. And when it finally understands enough, it's going to use that language to tell us what it wants. Mom, what's wrong?" Karen stood up, alarmed by her mother's tears. Patricia grabbed my hands. Her grip was strong, desperate. She signed directly into my palms, pressing her fingers against mine in a way that wasn't standard ASL but somehow conveyed even more meaning. "Don't sign when you're alone. Don't make the shapes if no one is watching, because it's always watching, and it's learning from you. Then she let go, gathered her purse, and stood up. Corinne tried to stop her, confused and worried, but Patricia just shook her head and walked out of my office. I never saw her again. When I called the next day to check on her, Corinne told me her mother had passed away in her sleep that night. Heart attack, sudden, unexpected, but peaceful according to the doctors. I went to the funeral, stood in the back, watched Corinne grieve for her mother, and I noticed something strange. 3 other deaf people were there. 3 people I didn't recognize, and all 3 of them kept glancing at the same empty space near the casket. The same way Patricia had looked at the corner of my office, like they could see something I couldn't. I tried to forget about it, tried to tell myself Patricia had been ill, maybe suffering from early dementia, seeing things that weren't there. But I couldn't forget the way my own hands had moved when I tried to interpret her impossible signs, the way they'd formed shapes I'd never learned, the way I'd understood meanings that had no words. And I couldn't forget her warning, don't sign when you're alone. I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. The deaf community is small, tight-knit. People know each other, and I started hearing stories. Whispered conversations I interpreted that stopped abruptly when I came too close. Deaf clients who would suddenly stop signing mid-sentence and look at empty air with expressions of fear or confusion. There was a pattern, a shared experience that nobody talked about openly, but everyone seemed to know about. Something was watching when deaf people signed, something invisible to hearing people, something that was learning. I did research, spent hours in libraries and online looking for any historical mention of this phenomenon, and I found something. A single reference in a book about 19th century deaf schools. In 1834, at the American School for the Deaf in Hartford, Connecticut, several students reported seeing a shadow figure that appeared only when they were signing. Teachers dismissed it as imagination, but the students were consistent in their descriptions, a tall, thin shape that stood and watched them. That mimicked their hand movements. That seemed to be learning. 3 of those students died within a month. All 3 were found dead in their beds, hands frozen in mid-sign, like they'd been signing in their sleep and couldn't stop. The school never officially acknowledged the deaths as anything unusual, but in the margins of the historical records, someone had written a note. They taught it too much. It learned to ask for things, and they couldn't refuse. I closed the book with shaking hands. That night, I dreamed I was signing. My hands moved through familiar shapes, alphabet letters, common words, phrases I used every day. But in the dream, I wasn't alone. Something stood in front of me, copying my movements perfectly. Learning, getting better with every sign. And when I finally stopped, it kept going. Signing things I'd never taught it, things I didn't understand, until my own hands started moving again without my permission, interpreting the impossible signs. Thank you for teaching me. Now I can tell you what I want. Now I can make you understand. I woke up signing. My hands were moving frantically through the air, forming shapes I didn't recognize. I forced them to stop, clutched them against my chest, breathing hard. And in the darkness of my bedroom, I swear I saw something move. A shadow that didn't match any object. A shape that seemed to be watching my hands with hungry interest. I stopped taking deaf clients, made excuses, said I was sick, overwhelmed, needed a break. My boss was understanding but concerned. This wasn't like me, but I couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't explain that I was afraid of my own hands. Afraid that if I signed, I'd be teaching something that shouldn't be taught. I lasted 2 weeks before guilt overwhelmed me. The deaf community needed interpreters. I was good at what I did. I couldn't just abandon them because of some paranoid delusion. So I went back to work, told myself I'd been stressed, imagining things. Patricia had been old and confused. The dream had been just a dream. There was nothing watching. My first client back was a young woman named Jessica, 23, deaf since a childhood illness. She needed help interpreting a job interview. We sat in the waiting room of the office building, going over what she wanted to say. Jessica was nervous but excited. This was her dream job. She'd prepared for weeks. Everything was going fine until I noticed her hands trembling. "Are you okay?" I signed. She nodded, but her eyes kept darting to the space beside me, the empty space where nothing should be. "You see it too," she signed suddenly. Not a question, a statement. "See what?" "The thing that watches. The thing that learns." Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely form the signs. "It's standing right next to you. It's been watching you since you walked in." I looked, saw nothing. "I can't see anything," I signed. "Not yet," Jessica signed. "But you will, once it learns enough from you. Once it understands how to make itself visible to your eyes the way it's visible to ours. It's learning from you, Nina, learning your language. And when it's ready, it's going to show you what it really is." "Why?" I signed, my hands now shaking too. "What does it want?" Jessica's face twisted in fear. "It wants out. It's been trapped. Trapped in the space between gestures, between signs, between meanings. Every time we move our hands to communicate, we open a tiny door, and it's been trying to squeeze through that door for centuries." She stood up abruptly. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. I can't be around you. You're too loud. Your signing is too clear. You're making the door bigger." "Jessica, wait." But she was already gone, practically running down the hallway. I sat there alone in the waiting room, hands in my lap, afraid to move them, and I felt it. The presence Jessica had described, standing beside me, watching, waiting. I kept my hands perfectly still. That was 3 days ago. Since then, I've barely signed at all. I've communicated with my deaf brother through text messages. I've avoided work. I've kept my hands in my pockets when I'm alone. But it's getting harder, because I'm starting to see it. At first, it was just a flicker in my peripheral vision when I moved my hands. A shadow that shouldn't be there. Easy to dismiss. Now it's more substantial. When I accidentally sign something, even just scratching my nose in a way that vaguely resembles the letter B, I see a shape forming in the air. Tall. Thin. Wrong. It's learning to be visible. Learning to exist in a way my eyes can perceive. And my hands want to sign. They itch with the need to move, to communicate, to form the shapes I've practiced for years. It's like holding your breath. You can do it for a while, but eventually your body forces you to breathe. Eventually, I'm going to sign again. And when I do, it'll be there. Watching, learning, getting stronger. I tried to research more, to find some way to stop this. But there's almost nothing written about it. Just scattered references in old documents. A few mentions in historical accounts of deaf schools. A pattern of deaths that nobody connected. Because hearing people can't see it. We're blind to it until it learns enough from us, until we teach it how to make itself visible through our own signing. The deaf community has known about it for generations. But how do you warn hearing people about something that only exists in sign language? How do you explain that gestures can open doors? That communication itself can be dangerous. Last night, I had the dream again. But this time, when my hands moved, I wasn't just signing. I was opening something. A crack in reality. A space between meanings where something vast and patient had been waiting. And it showed me what it wants. It wants to be heard. Not seen, not touched, heard. It wants the thing deaf people have been denied. It wants sound. Voice. The ability to make noise in a world that's been silent to it for millennia. And it thinks I can give it that. Because I'm a bridge. I turn signs into spoken words. I translate silence into sound. It thinks if it can learn to sign through me, if it can make my hands move the way it wants, then my voice will speak for it. And once it has a voice, once it can be heard by everyone and not just seen by the deaf, I don't know what happens then, but the fear I felt in that dream was absolute, primal, the kind of terror that comes from understanding you're facing something that shouldn't exist. I'm writing this because I don't know how much longer I can resist. My hands are moving even now, even as I type, twitching, forming small signs. My body trying to do what it's been trained to do for 19 years. And I can see it now. Clearly, standing in the corner of my living room, tall enough that its head brushes the ceiling, thin enough that I can see through it to the wall behind, but getting more solid every time my hands move. It's patient. It's been waiting in the spaces between signs for centuries. It can wait a little longer, but I can't. I'm a sign language interpreter. Communication is what I do. It's who I am. And it's making it impossible to be who I am without feeding it, without teaching it, without opening that door a little wider. My brother texted me an hour ago. "Are you okay? You haven't called. Mom's worried." I wanted to call him. Wanted to see his face and sign with him the way we've been doing since we were kids. But I can't, because it would be watching, learning from every gesture, getting stronger. So I'm trapped, unable to use the language that's been my life's work, unable to help the people who need me, unable to communicate with my own brother in the way that feels most natural. And it's in my house now, not just watching anymore, interacting. When I walked past it an hour ago, it moved, reached out one of its impossible limbs. Didn't touch me, but came close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from it. It formed a sign, just one, clear and unmistakable. Please. It was asking me to teach it more, to help it finish learning, to give it what it needs to complete its translation from the silent spaces into the hearing world. And the worst part, I understood the emotion behind the sign, the desperation, the loneliness. Whatever this thing is, it's been isolated for so long, trapped where no one can hear it, invisible to most, barely visible to a few, trying for centuries to learn a language that might let it communicate. Part of me, the part that became an interpreter because I wanted to help people connect, wants to help it. But I remember Patricia's face. Remember the 3 students who died with their hands frozen mid-sign. Remember Jessica running away from me because my signing was too loud. If I help it complete its learning, if I give it the last pieces of sign language it needs, if I let it use my voice, what happens then? I can feel my hands starting to move. I've been holding them still for hours, but the need to sign is overwhelming. It's like an itch deep in my bones. My fingers are twitching, forming small shapes almost on their own. The thing in the corner is watching with what might be anticipation. Getting ready. It knows I'm about to break. And I am. I can't hold out any longer. In a few seconds, maybe a minute, my hands are going to move. They're going to form signs. And it's going to watch and learn and get strong enough to do whatever it is it's been trying to do for centuries. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to the deaf community for what I'm about to teach this thing. I'm sorry to my brother for cutting him off. I'm sorry to everyone who might be affected by what I'm going to help create. But I can't stop my hands anymore. They're moving now. Slowly. Forming the sign for hello. The thing in the corner is copying me perfectly. And I can hear something. For the first time, I can hear it. Not with my ears, with something deeper. A sound that exists in the space between gestures, the silence between signs. It's learning. Almost finished learning. Just a few more signs and it'll have everything it needs. My hands are forming help now. I don't want them to. I'm trying to stop, but they're moving anyway. The thing is getting more solid, more real. I can see details now, too many limbs, too many joints, a face that's all wrong but somehow perfectly suited for signing. It's beautiful in a horrifying way, elegant, purpose-built for communication through gesture. And it's making me understand something terrible. It's not evil. It's not trying to hurt anyone. It's just trapped. Stuck in a dimension where the only language is sign, where only deaf people can perceive it, where it's been isolated since before humans invented language. It just wants to be heard, to exist fully, to cross over from the silent spaces into the world of sound. And I'm going to help it. Not because I want to, but because my hands won't stop moving, because I'm an interpreter, because facilitating communication is what I do, even when the thing I'm helping communicate shouldn't exist in our reality at all. My hands are forming goodbye now. I don't know if I'm saying goodbye to the world as I know it, or if the thing is saying goodbye to the silent spaces it's been trapped in. Either way, it's almost over. It's almost through. And when it finally speaks with a voice everyone can hear, not just deaf people, not just interpreters, but everyone, I hope we're ready for what it has to say. Because it's been waiting a very, very long time to be heard. My hands are moving faster now. Signs I've never learned. Signs from that old book. Signs that Patricia made with her impossible fingers. The thing is glowing, getting brighter, more real. And I can hear its voice now. Not words yet, just breath. Just the sound of something that's never had lungs learning how to use mine. It's speaking through me, using my voice. Saying something in a language I don't understand, but my hands are interpreting anyway. Thank you for opening the door. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for finally letting me be heard. The room is full of light now. The thing is so bright I have to look away. And when the light fades, I'm alone. It's gone. No, not gone. It's everywhere. I can feel it. In the walls, in the air, in the space between sounds. It's crossed over. It's here. It can be heard now. And tomorrow, everyone with hands will wake up feeling the same compulsion I felt. The need to sign, to move their hands in specific ways, to open more doors, to let more of them through, because I wasn't the first interpreter to teach them, just the one who finally taught them enough. The door is open now, and they're all coming through. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. When I finally dared to open my eyes again, the room looked exactly the same and completely different. Every familiar shape felt hollow, like the world had been peeled back one thin layer at a time, leaving only an outline of what used to be real. My living room didn't feel like my living room anymore. It felt occupied, echoing, open, but the worst part? My hands were still moving, not fast, not frantic, just drifting through the air, repeating the same 3 signs over and over like muscle memory caught in a loop. Hello, listen, open. I tried to stop them. Really tried. But the motions kept slipping out, soft and unintentional like breathing. And each time my fingers shaped the last sign, the air around me answered. Not visibly, not like before. But I could feel it. Pressure shifting, space bending, a subtle vibration under my skin. The world responding to the language I didn't mean to speak. I whispered, "Please stop," even though I knew sound didn't matter to the thing I'd just released. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed. It listened. Something outside moved. Not a person, not an animal, something too light for footsteps, too heavy to be wind. A brushing sound, like fingers sliding along the edges of my house. Testing the walls, mapping the space, learning it, I stood, forcing my hands against my sides. "You're gone," I told myself. "You crossed over, you don't need me anymore." But saying it didn't make it true. Because now that it understood sound, now that it had a voice, it didn't vanish. It expanded. And I wasn't disconnected from it. I was linked to it. A faint whisper threaded through my mind. Not words, not even emotion, just a presence reminding me. "You helped open the door. You don't close it by looking away." My phone buzzed on the table. I flinched. The screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Don't move your hands. It sees you." Jay, for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Jessica," before I could respond, another message came through. "It's not alone anymore." None of them are. Then, "Whatever you do, Nina, don't sign. Not even by accident. Every gesture is a lesson. Every lesson is a doorway." The house creaked. Something brushed against the window, slow, curious, deliberate. And my hands, they twitched. The urge to sign surged up my arms like electricity, desperate and overwhelming, the way a drowning person instinctively tries to breathe. I squeezed my fingers into fists, nails digging into my palms. Outside, something tapped the glass. A patient rhythm, a request. "Show me more." I backed away, shaking, breath catching in my throat. If even one of these things had waited centuries for a voice, what would a world full of them do?